Hello, everyone. I'm Deb Coviello, the Drop In CEO. And as always, I'm grateful you have joined me for another episode where week after week I have these most amazing conversations with guests that have insights for the C suite leader to help them navigate their challenges with confidence. And this week, my guest is Elle George, who is a serial entrepreneur, disruptor, and investor. Her new book, Before You Shake Hands, is the ultimate partnership toolkit with hard earned lessons on power, betrayal, and avoiding $1 million mistakes. I can't wait to go here. But Elle, I just want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for dropping in.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, and to my audience, I am so pleased to learn about her. When I learned about her book, Before You Shake Hands, and all the thought leadership points, I don't think I've ever talked about some of these topics on the show. So, whether you are a business owner, C suite leader, I can't wait for her to share her insights out of her book, Before You Shake Hands. But I am going to pass the mic to her first to get acquainted with her and share a little bit about herself personally as well as her career journey. Elle?
Thank you so much. Well, great to be here and have this conversation with you. And it's a conversation that not many people have, and one that I think it's long overdue. I am as you said, a serial entrepreneur, a bit of a polymath. I live in Bali in Indonesia and have done for over a decade, nearly 15 years, actually, or 16 years. And it's a wonderful environment to be in. Not only is it paradise, but it's allowed me to start businesses, have aligned businesses, heart-led businesses that have evolved into one. And now I've got 5 or 6 businesses in Indonesia, which I love, and they've kind of just evolved from one to the next. And it really gives a beautiful lifestyle. I've got nutrition businesses, I've got hospitality businesses, I've got manufacturing businesses for activewear, boutiques, Pilates studios, just lots of things. When I not when I get bored, but when I feel that there's a gap in the market or something that the community needs, then it's a good opportunity to sort of lean into that and see if there's a possibility for that in the market. And I've been very grateful for the life that it's given me. But it wasn't always that way. I wrote Before You Shake Hands because I had a partnership that went very, very wrong. And I think we don't ask those critical questions that we need when it comes to business. And so this wasn't a book that was written as a he said, she said, or going into the nitty gritty of a legal battle. It's very much a book on alignment. And all the questions, I think, after going through that process in my life of how did I come back from that? And what are the questions that people should be asking? And they're now questions that I ask in business and with other people, whether it's, in a potential business opportunity or helping friends when they're considering, what should I do here? I'm thinking about going into business here or there, and advice that you can give. Because when we're caught up in emotion, we always, it's like shopping, right? We buy on emotion and then we justify with logic later.
Mm.
So, and that's for men and women. We get so excited about being chosen, I think, that we forget to ask the critical questions. And so that's what this book is about. It's not about the nitty-gritty of the court case. It's actually about the battle wounds and the battle scars that came out of it, and how you pick yourself up and how you move through and navigate those when you're choosing a business partner. So I'm really excited to have
Mm.
that conversation and be able to put Before You Shake Hands out there.
So fantastic. And when you said you had 5 to 6 businesses, I'm saying, oh my, how did you manage that? Now, did that success or that journey come after the business challenge that you described in Before You Shake Hands, or were they kind of already in play? Just help me to understand the timeline here.
No, they were very much later. They were very much a product of survival. I guess
Oh.
you need to pick yourself up and put your bootstraps on and get out there and have another go. I didn't want to go into corporate. I was homeschooling my young son. I've got 3 children, and 2 of them are older, one's younger. And so I was homeschooling with him parked right next to me, and wanted to keep that lifestyle that I had. I'm a surfer. The ocean is kind of my true north, so I need to be on it, in it, or near it at any point. And it was very much looking at what sort of scenario did I want my life to be, and then building things around that lifestyle rather than trying to fit my lifestyle in with
Mm.
business. I built it around the life that I wanted and the true alignment of that. And then things just fell into place. So it was, it was after that. And it was a matter of I needed to survive. I needed to get back out there and find something to do. So I started with consulting, and then that led to different businesses.
So, yes, it was a matter of survival, but there's also an element of after having gone through such a challenging experience, and again, we
Mm.
will get into those details shortly. How did you regain that confidence? Because when somebody goes through such a bad business situation,
Yeah.
um, it could be devastating and a long journey to be able to pick oneself up and be able to move forward. So, what did you do to be able to, beyond just surviving, create 5 to 6 businesses thereafter?
Yeah, and I think that's a really key question. I think people, at some point, there is a point where you literally want to curl up in the fetal position and binge Netflix, right? There becomes that point. But then, reality kicks in. You've got kids, you've got bills, you've got things that you need to get on with. And it's not a matter of, oh, just get out there. You need to do the work, you need to do the healing. It's like a normal relationship. You don't just wake up one morning and say, okay, I'm going to get, a job. I think because I had been an entrepreneur in that previous life as well, I feel somewhat, once you're an entrepreneur, you become somewhat unemployable. And you know what I
Amen.
mean? Once you've been the boss, it's very hard to go back, and you start to go for interviews because you have to. And don't get me wrong, when it originally happened, I worked in cafes. I did anything I needed to do to pay the bills. And I also went through a health crisis during that time, a very severe health crisis, which had a massive knock-on effect to the way that I led my life. And I just kept my alignment. I just knew how I wanted to live and what I wanted that to be and what I wanted that to look like every day. How did I want every day to feel when I woke up? And I just stayed true to that, and then just tried to find things that fitted within that. But in the meantime, I was out there hustling. I did whatever I needed to do. If that was helping friends in business, doing things online, sometimes 4 and 5 things. My girlfriends always say to me, "You've had 100 lives." And because we giggle sometimes, oh, I've done this, I've done that. It's like, is there anything you haven't done? It's like, you know what? When you need to do what you need to do, you get it done.
This is very inspiring because I too, I've been an entrepreneur for 6 years. Maybe in my heart, even when I was a child, I was always looking like, how could I make money? What could I sell? What could I do? And I've always been a creative that way. And then I too went into the corporate framework for which I did wonderful work and had a wonderful life. But then felt like I don't fit here anymore. So
Yeah.
I've had to hustle, and I bet you there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that have had to. And we often yearn for that overnight success, but it comes with those battle wounds and survival. Sometimes you have to do certain things in order to get to that
Yep. You do.
desired outcome. And a key word you keep bringing up, and I'm going to bring it up for my listeners, is the word alignment. It seems to be that
Mhm.
stake in the ground, the alignment that you needed for when you feel off track
Correct.
and when you know that you're on track. Okay.
Absolutely.
So before you shake hands, I would love to know a little bit about then the inspiration. We know that why you wrote the book, but like, what did you discover about yourself while writing that? Because it's not just about the content you put out, but it's also a journey going through that process.
Yeah. It wasn't just, I think that started before I wrote the book. The book came years later, and it's only recently all over. It was a 17-year legal battle, and there was many thoughts in that 17 years that went through my mind. There was resentment, there was, thoughts of revenge. There was all of these things that you as a human go through when something so crazy happens. I went through a very dramatic hostile takeover. There was, which I didn't see coming. There was total misalignment from the start. That had we seen, that was like red flags going off everywhere. Um, but I think, through that process of writing the book, it was very cathartic, like I said.
Mm.
But there was all these aha moments of and the book kind of goes through with questions under each category. So it has 5 different categories: values and trust, roles and responsibilities,
Mm.
financials, legals, and exit strategies. And then under every section, there is numerous questions, and each section has a question, and then it gives you why it's important. And it goes into great detail on why you should be asking that question, why that's so important to be asking, and what can come up from that. So it was a little bit strange writing it, because as I was giving these questions, it was reopening old wounds for me, I guess, and then going through
Mm.
that process of doing the deep dive on what emotions that was bringing up again. And some of them weren't pretty, I'll be honest. Some of them, there was rage, there was annoyance, there was frustration. But all in all, it was such a great process, because it also made me realize how far I'd come as a
Oh,
person who had done the
oh.
work, and to come over things like wanting to seek revenge or being angry or wanting to go after people. And I have no resentment anymore. All that healing was done a long time ago. I have all of my businesses are heart led. I show up in the world with love always,
Mm.
even when I don't feel like it. And some people trigger me in certain ways. And I don't really like using that word, but I can't think of another one, because that's literally what it is. It sort of opens up a wound, and it's a pressure point that people seem to press that opens up certain emotions for us. And having to lean back into those and feel all the feels and still make the right decision, when it might be easier to make a quick, snappy decision that might feel good at the time in that moment, whether it's revenge or, and I've always brought my children up that you never use the word hate in our house ever. I've just never used it. So I never had hate towards these people. I tried to look at it in a way of a relationship. If you were going to go into a relationship with a new partner, and they come into their life or their relationship with their childhood traumas from mother wounds or father wounds or whatever it is, this is how we show up. It affects our attachment styles as humans, and this is how we show up in the world. So I tried to lean into those areas and thinking, well, this is why these people are this way, or maybe this happened to them and that's why they behaved that way. I try and look at the best side, and half of it I'm probably so far off the planet, maybe they're just evil, I have no idea. But I like to think that how I process it is in a way that I still try to show up with love and have a bit of empathy towards people of why they might have reacted in that way. Maybe they were under pressure in other areas of their life. I don't know, but I certainly don't show up with hate. And what's that old quote, when you drink, I think it's something like, you drink from the poisonous cup and expect the other person to die, I think.
Yeah,
Something like that,
we have to take the high road. I mean, seek to
we
understand.
do.
We cannot completely know that other human until we take a sincere interest in why is it that they behave a certain way? Why is there a gap
Absolutely.
between how we perceive the situation? Why did we approach this business thing were we not in alignment? And it seems that over time, after having some wounds, if I've got this right, is that how do you get to a place of calm where you can perform? And what I'm hearing is just seek to understand. Maybe they're
Mm,
not evil, take the high road. But I'm curious, like, how do you personally calm yourself knowing that you see these things all the time? How do you center
yeah.
yourself when you start seeing a misalignment in a business relationship? What do you do personally? Because I'm sure there's a lot of leaders out there that feel this angst, that feel this discomfort, the butterflies in their stomach. They're starting to lose
Mhm.
sleep at night. They have to get themselves centered again in some way to be able to then deal with the situation. So what say you to others to just kind of come back to center so you can deal with it and navigate it?
Yeah, I think probably my biggest advice is one that I share with all my friends when we have the same conversation: is what do I do here? What do I do there? And that is, I never make a decision when I'm not at equilibrium,
Mm.
high or low. It's so important. It's literally how that comes in play with my kids, my friends, all my relationships, whether they're business or personal. I never ever make a decision when I'm not at equilibrium. And what I mean by that is, when you've got heightened emotion or you've had a huge win in the business and you think,
Mm.
I'm going to rush off and make this decision. We're on a high. This is amazing. And because you're not thinking it through straight, you're being heightened by that emotion. And on the opposite, you've had a loss in the business, a key player might have resigned, something might have happened, you might have had a big loss, I don't know, machines blew up, whatever it might have happened, COVID, who knows?
Mm.
Don't make quick decisions based on emotion, because they are 100% the wrong one, and they're not generally 90% of the time not aligned with what your soul goal and soul purpose is. And I say soul because how do I get to that point of calm? Through finding things that I love doing, and that is through meditation. I do not start my day without my meditation. And I know people say that, and other people think it's woo woo, but it is not just about, sitting there and having kumbaya and listening to birds tweet. It's about quieting your mind. And a lot of CEOs struggle with that. A lot of entrepreneurs struggle with being able to quiet that noise. And once you master that art, you can master anything. And for me, it's also being in and doing things when I realize that I'm in situations where I'm not aligned, or I've made a decision that I've now regret. How do I get back to center? Is by going into nature. I find, or things that I love doing. For me, it's
Mm.
surfing. I can literally hop on my board, even if there's no surf. If I can get in the ocean, if I'm in it, on it, or near it, for me, the ocean is my true north. And I know that. So
Mhm.
if, I'm very grateful that I live on the beach. I can literally walk 20 meters out of my house and I have a white sandy beach with beautiful
Beautiful.
blue water, and I can either go for a stand-up paddle or I can go for a surf, and it brings me back to my center. So I'm sure your listeners, as we say that, might have that one thing, whether it's yoga practice, whether it's going for a run, or reading a book, or whatever it is to get them to that point of calm. I think that's really important, that we recenter ourselves before we can show up for others.
Yeah, one of the things that I also do, because my brain is always going, is there's always a million things, and I will find sometimes I will wake up in the middle of the night,
Sure.
even if things are going well, I'll start thinking,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, I might as well get up now. I can't fall asleep. I do find by writing things down and
Hmm.
scheduling, I will work on this tomorrow. I have gotten it out of my head. I can sleep good at night knowing that I've saved it, I've captured it, and I know exactly what I'm going to be doing the following day
Absolutely.
based on it. So let's move now into a
Hmm.
place of red flags where I want you to be able to share your advice relative to early red flags and that leaders should pay attention to that signal that the partnership or the relationship may erode your peace of mind. So tell me more about the red flags.
For sure. Well, the red flags are literally alignment. The entire process of finding a partner is alignment. So one of the very first questions that I would be asking someone is, why do you want to invest in my business? That's the first question. Most of us don't ask that. So, and I refer to some of the shows you've got in America and Shark Tank and these sorts of things where everybody wants to be chosen. We're excited. We feel validated that somebody's chosen us, chosen our idea, and has validated that concept. So our ego's a little bit inflated. We're a bit excited and we just want to get into the nitty gritty. What
Mm,
does a partnership look like? What's the split? What's the money? Involvement. But before we even start that conversation, the red flags, they come with the questions, and it's literally like dating. And I'll use that as a scenario. Do you want to have kids?
mm,
How, are you religious? If so, what religion? How are we going to bring up our kids? Where are we going to live? So that's no different than our business questions. So when we say to somebody, why do you want to invest in the business? It's a very straight answer. And they're going to say either because I want to invest in you, I've seen what you've done before, I think you're amazing, and everything you does turns to gold. Or they're going to turn around and say, you know what, I just need to park some tax dollars. And or you know what, I'm serious. Or you know what, I'm going through a divorce and I want to, I'm whatever the reason. These would be major red flags. It's not like, oh, okay, cool, thanks, and moving on to the next question. I mean, that would be a run don't walk situation, literally abort straight away. And so, very quickly, I think these are the questions that we don't ask. A red flag is also if you want to ask critical questions of alignment and somebody doesn't want to have the conversation. For
mm,
example, tell me about any legal trouble or financial loss you might have experienced in a business that you've been part of before, whether it's your own or a
mhm,
partnership.
mhm,
And how did you navigate that? Full stop. Let them share with you what they did. Now, it's not because you want to be nosy and get into the nitty
mhm.
gritty of the gossip and he said, she said, and all the rest of it. You want to know their battle scars. I don't care
Well,
what the nitty gritty of the relationship was, unless there was impropriety and fraud. But what I want to know is, how did you get back up? So when we go through tough times, I want to know how you rebuilt. I want to know what the battle scar was, what you learned from it, and how are you going to bring that into our relationship so that there is no misalignment and there's no wobbles in the road. Questions like, what's your communication style?
Mhm.
Is so important because I'm a good communicator. I love
Yeah.
talking everything through and communicating highs and lows so that when we do hit the wobbles in the road, we just communicate through it. Okay, what are we going to do here? But a lot of people aren't like that. A lot of people play their cards close to their chest, and boardrooms become poker tables. And, I think when those things are in play and there is misalignment on people's motives of why they've come into the business or what their intentions are whilst they're in the business,
Mhm.
those things can be brought up before you've even signed on the dotted line. And if you find those, these are the things that could have saved me so much heartache and questions. Would you be willing to undergo a credit check?
It is a
Right?
business transaction.
It's a business transaction. Now, most of us, we're financial, we go into a marriage, there's either going to be a prenup or we're going to have a financial discussion. Who pays for what? What if we have a big investment? We're going to buy a house. Do we go half halves, or we're older? Do you have a house? Do I have a house? What are we going to do? Well, there's no difference in business. What are you bringing in? What am I bringing in? What's the split? Who pays for what? What happens if we've grown the business and we need to do a big expansion? Who's going to put up the collateral? What if I'm not in a position to put up any money, but because I've got other things and my money's spoken for, or I just don't have any more,
Mhm.
but we need to expand? We can't get a bank loan because our business is new. Are you going to put it in, and what does that look like? Do the shares convert? How does, is it a loan agreement? All of these things that people just don't even discuss until they're in business.
And
And
then
they're
it's
all
too
red
late.
flags if people aren't willing to have them until it's too late. And so the book is really about the critical questions that you need to ask before you sign on the dotted line with anyone, anyone at all, and even consider it.
So the red flags are part of the early dating, the early
Hmm.
relationship building. Let's just
Yeah.
say you have full transparency, you've got great rapport, you've seen how they've dealt with challenging situations. So you feel
Hmm.
like the partnership may be of value. I can talk to this person, we can communicate, our values are aligned. But I think I want to
Hmm.
go a little bit deeper when you then start, what can you do to find out how this person may bring strengths or
Hmm.
weaknesses detract from what you're trying to build? Like, are there other questions or behaviors that you would look for, whether they would be a strength or a detriment to the business?
100%. And it can be almost like doing a job interview when you're recruiting for high value staff.
Hmm.
Of It's not a Spanish Inquisition, as I refer to. It's about dating, right?
Yeah.
And in a job interview, in anything, you would actually ask a candidate then, tell me about a time where, there was conflict or you faced a situation where you needed to get this result or that result, and how did you go about doing that? And
Hmm.
and what was the outcome of that? So you're not literally sort of grilling somebody and saying, question one, okay, da-da-da-da, question two, da-da-da. It's a conversation. And there are so many things when we communicate with other people of how we could bring things in that are just a conversation, and it doesn't seem like we're, like I said, that we're grilling them, and we've got this checklist as such. And I think when you do that, people put their guard down. We're getting to know each other. It's like making
Yeah.
friends with people. Oh, tell me about this. It's like being with friends and hearing about their battle wounds and their scars and the bumps in the road. You get to know people, and it allows you to crack them open a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and as I think about you talking about this, while you may have established rapport, the red flags have gone away, I can align with
Hmm.
this person, but you may also then find, all this person wants to do is just be out on the road dealing with customers. They're not going to want to be in the business. I need an
100%.
operations partner. So you may say, I don't need a salesperson. I don't need that customer
Correct.
facing. So it may be then as you're courting this relationship, it might be, I thought it would be a good business relationship. Why don't we just create a referral partner relationship? We don't have to be
100%.
together. Let's leverage your strength. You can refer business to me. I can give you cut, but I don't think it's worth the marriage.
100. That's exactly right. And it can come in ways of but it can also come in ways of when you're looking at your business, you might both be CEOs. You might both be, branding experts, for example,
Mhm.
or marketing expert, branding expert. You both might have financial background and
Yeah,
no marketing experience and no, but what you need is, someone that's going to be forward facing in the business, because you might be the tech and the financial and don't want to have that forward facing role. And what you really need is someone that can step up and take on that role. Now, if you're not getting that, there's no point. There's
absolutely.
really no point. They're not bringing anything else to the table, not just money. You can get that from anywhere, but they're not bringing anything else to the table that's going to add value to you moving the business forward.
So let's now shift gears a little bit to now that you're in a toxic partnership, you are
Hmm.
trapped. And it may not necessarily be a business partnership. I'm sure there's C-suite leaders out there that just have toxic people in their ecosystem and they cannot find their way out. So, as to the extent that you can share, what then are some of the steps that
Mm,
you can either repair or get out, but eventually
yeah.
de-escalate the toxic relationship that you're experiencing?
Absolutely. And I think that comes down to communication again. And that works if you've got somebody else that's willing to communicate, which is great. And then you can sit down and call a director's meeting and have an agenda and make it a light agenda, just raising some of the issues. And hopefully you've already done that through communication. But sometimes, as a last resort, you need to go down that path of calling
Mhm.
a director's meeting so that you can be forced into having the conversations.
Mhm.
But definitely keep records of everything. I think that was one of the things that saved me. Keeping notes of key conversations where promises have been made or someone didn't do what they say they were going to do and they didn't deliver on what they'd promised. And it's not about he said, she said, and pointing the finger, but it's just about having things that you can recall, discussion points that need to be addressed without having it feel like it's an attack. And I think that's very important. In the early stages, I mean, mine was a very different situation. Mine was a hostile takeover over, reassigning assets, things like that behind scenes, and it was a bombshell. But and the pin had already been pulled long before I even realised it. However, when it's sort of in the infancy stages of things, communication is key, and really de-escalated communication. Don't allow things to get to
Mm.
the point where you're not talking to your partner, or there's Chinese whispers going around the office of other people trying to get messages here and there. You really need to create that from the start. But if you're already in it, and it depends how far it's gone, if it's already gone legal, then my suggestion is keep everything from emails, printing off emails, not just leaving things on servers that can be deleted and things can be hacked conveniently and those sorts of things. Because what happens when money's involved is people get very murky memories
Mm.
and it muddies the waters and they have a very strange recollection of how things play out. So when things go down that path, people will, in situations of greed, not always, but a lot of the time, try and recreate history in their minds to justify their behavior. And they will also sometimes try to do it with physical things like changing documents, editing documents. And in this day and age, when I first went through what I did, it was the early to mid 2000s. I think now when you've got AI, PDFs can be opened and edited, and these sorts of things, emails can be edited in this day and
Mm.
age. It's a very rocky road. So when you go through things like that, always make sure you keep records, print things, just little journal notes or notes on your phone of dates and conversations. And that sounds like, oh, do I really want to do that? Do I want to be in a situation where I don't trust someone? But it's life. It is just what it is. You can only control the controllables, and that's you. You can't control other people's behavior. But what you
Uh,
can do is manage your reaction to it and keep journals for yourself so that you can sort of limit the downfall, or minute the impact zone, if you like, minimize the impact
yeah.
zone.
I mean, you said something that I've been told that's a very strong point that you make
Hmm.
is that you cannot control the actions of others, but you can control
Hmm.
yourself, your emotion, your
100%.
behavior, your activity.
Yeah.
So I think that's a key point out of that as
Hmm.
well. But given, let's just say you have had the early dating, it looks like it's a good relationship. You've talked about strengths and weaknesses, you complement each other, things look like they're going okay. Would you
Hmm.
still make the recommendation of keeping copious notes and tracking things,
Of
even if
course.
things seem like they're going okay?
I would, but I mean, it wouldn't be to the degree that I would do it if I sensed something was off. I would definitely make and keep notes of key achievements or key
Okay.
conversations in the business. So, for example, it might not have been a formal meeting, but we might have had a conversation about expansion and what would that look like. And we might need to get a new factory, for example, or we're expanding restaurants or whatever it is. We might have gone so great that we used to use a 3PL, but now we've decided to get our own huge facility and buy trucks and all of these things, right? I would then put those conversations down and what we talked about and what sort of finance we talked about. And certainly when promises have been made from people, if somebody said, yes, well, I will do this, and yes, I will provide that, I would certainly make date and time notes of meetings, of promises that were made in the business, not because I don't trust you, simply because I don't know you.
Yeah, we can never know somebody completely. People can change down the
Absolutely.
road. We won't know their
And life
circumstances.
situation changes,
Yeah. I mean,
you know?
I mean, I had a question here I was going to ask you about portrayal and power, but it's not come up. But
Hmm.
those are almost just, I never want to have to deal with betrayal in a business. Like, I thought we had an agreement and then I've been cut out of conversations. It's a
Hmm.
terrible feeling. And then also, the power changes and people are starting to have closed meetings over here. I guess, what would you
Hmm.
do in that situation? Because this is reality, whether it's a business or maybe you're acquired by private equity. I know I have dealt with a lot of C-suite leaders where all of a sudden the business is bought by private equity,
Yeah,
and then little by little, they are no longer included in these meetings. And so all kinds of
sure.
emotion can build up. You don't know if you're being losing your power or what. So given that set of circumstances, again, this is not directly related to your book, but when you
Hmm.
find the ecosystem is changing, the balance of power or the information is changing, what might you do to either regain some control or be able to navigate something when you feel like this doesn't feel right anymore when it felt great before?
Yeah, look, I think that's really important. And I think as leaders, and to be entrepreneurs and start our own businesses anyway, there's a fair amount of ego that goes into it. Whether you say, oh, I don't have an ego, there's a fair amount of ego to get up in the
Sure.
morning and back yourself and say, hey, I'm going to have a crack at this. And I hope people believe in it. So I think the first thing for me is learning what my strengths and weaknesses are and what my communication styles are as a person. And I don't know if you understand or have heard about attachment styles before in relationships in our life of what we are. So we have attachment styles that come from our childhood. And they're predominantly how our parents showed up for us and each other,
Mm,
and that determines how we show up in romantic relationships. So, for example, if I had a beautiful home life, my mum and dad, it was just a gorgeous household. There was no divorce. They communicated well. We just had such a place of love. They told us they loved us. It was a very safe space for them and us as children. As an adult in my now romantic relationships with my children and with my romantic partners or partner, I would then show up in a very secure attachment style. So that means that I'm totally secure in that environment. I don't feel like I'm going to be betrayed. I feel
mm,
like I can show up in a way where I know what great communication looks like. Um, and those sort of different scenarios. And that means I just lead with an open heart and very calm environment. However, then I could be a child that grew up in a divorce household with parents that were screaming at each other and trying to, nothing was done behind closed doors. They were arguing over the dinner table and screaming at each other in the driveway and, arguing on who was having the kids this weekend. And it was very, it was a bit chaotic. Or, you might have had lots of siblings. So you're fighting for attention
mm,
and those sorts of things, right? That would give you possibly and depending what your future relationships were, that would give you possibly an anxious attachment style, which means that when you're pushed into a corner or you have to make these decisions or people trigger you, it opens up a wound for you where you feel like you need to prove your worth,
mm.
right?
Yes.
So then we have the worst one, and no, none is worse than the other, but we have the worst one for the people who are in it, which is an avoidant attachment style. And you might have heard it, thrown about over the years. And that is where people have grown up in such a chaotic environment in their home. And that's either with maybe drug and alcohol issues, it would be a parent who's abandoned them, or maybe no parents in the house at all, or, you know, parents with mental health issues that maybe sort of go AWOL and then come back and love bomb and those sorts of things. So in a romantic partnership, that would be called an avoidant. And there's different types of avoidant. There's dismissive avoidant, fearful avoidant, all these things. And that makes us show up. So in a romantic relationship, if I was an avoidant partner and I'd had this chaotic life, situation, what feels safe for you as a secure with this kumbaya household and how you
Yeah.
process and you trust people and it's all wonderful and you don't think the worst?
Mm,
For an avoidant, when things feel beautiful and real and oh my God, I just met, for a man, for instance, I just met the woman of my
mm.
dreams, they panic and pull away. And it's not them being a horrible man. It might be the most beautiful unicorn man, but they panic and pull away because it doesn't feel safe.
So
And it
all of
doesn't feel
these, yeah.
safe because they can't process it. So if we can now look at that as who we are as people, and no one's immune. We all have an attachment
Mhm,
style in our love lives, romantic lives, family life, whatever that is. And sometimes you can toggle between the two. So I'm a secure attachment, but I used to be anxious because I have numerous siblings. And, as the next one came along, it was like, hi, I'm over here doing this, pick me, pick me.
mhm,
And so over time, I used to be anxious. I've now, through life and the work that I've done and shadow work and putting the work in, are now a secure attachment style. However, people can bring me back into my anxious depending on how they treat me.
mm.
Not always. And sometimes I see it, but sometimes I don't. And then I feel like I have to prove my worth. So if we now translate that from our personal lives, which affects every part of our life, but for some reason, therapy and what have you only apply it to romantic relationships. But what if we then transferred that into our business life and our
Yeah.
leadership life of how we show up for our business partners, our staff, how we lead? Because there's certainly all of those personalities in our business.
Mhm.
So you might have someone that their only form of communication is, chaotic because that's what their life was. And they
Yeah.
crave that, rigid, beautiful situation, but they're petrified of it. And it's not them that shuts down, it's their nervous system. So we're just all humans moseying
Yes.
on through the planet. So now, if we translate that into a business environment, and what you mentioned in the question was, how do we show up without being in our egoic self, if you
Yeah.
like?
Mhm.
If we can understand and do the work on who we are in a personal situation
Yeah.
as leaders, that's the true work. I'm putting together a framework called the Intuitive CEO. We need to know and understand who we are as people and how we show up in the world, not just how we show up in business, how we treat our friends, issues that we have with communication, and do the work to uncover those things and put the healing work in our journey, which will help us both in our personal and our business life. But if we can do that, we can step away from that ego and say, okay, these are things that I've done. So a question you asked me right at the start was, what did it feel when I wrote the book? Well, what it
Mhm.
opened up for me were mistakes that I'd made and maybe how I didn't communicate certain situations properly because I was very immature back then. I wasn't an experienced CEO. I hadn't led many staff.
Yeah.
Now in across all my businesses, I've got nearly 500 staff across different things. But how do I show up in that way when you don't know what you don't know?
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing point here that you talk about because if we can understand why we show up the way we do and then develop certain
Hmm.
mechanisms to manage it and stay in alignment
Hmm.
and not let so much emotion come out without losing yourself, you still need to be authentic. Having done that work, can we then, in the relationships and the interfaces we have with new people that come
Absolutely.
into our ecosystem, partners, et cetera, you don't want to pry too much into one's personal life, but if you can ask a few questions about, hey, where'd you come from? What was your home life like? You might be able to say, oh, they might be this way. Again, seek to understand. But then once you
Hmm.
notice the attachment styles, the business styles, which may be similar, you can then take the high road and know how to maybe navigate it or not put that person on the defensive. Still have to run business, but the way you communicate and interface with that person might be a little bit different to avoid a toxic relationship. The power is even, et cetera.
Absolutely.
So I
Yes.
appreciate bringing in a little bit of self work to be able to navigate and how you can interface and not control others, but know how to respond respectfully versus just being triggered. Great
You can
insights.
simply
Yeah.
just ask the question of, or say to them, my communication style is this.
Yeah.
And when I communicate, this is what's important for me. So make it about yourself. So you don't feel like you're telling them off or judging them. You can say, well, I'm actually a great communicator. I love communication. So
Yeah.
for me, these are the things that are important. What about you? And then they're
Yeah.
going to tell
Pull
you
them into
straight
the
away what they like
conversation.
or don't.
Yeah.
100%. And
Yeah.
that's a perfect way to bring them in without them feeling like you're judging them or, that you are grilling them.
So this has been an amazing conversation. I think everybody should out there, take a look at your book, check out the book before you shake hands. It also says the founder of mistakes no one warns you about. Again, by Elle George. I think this is a valuable resource for any of my C-suite leaders out there. I'd love for you to check it out because again, we want to trust our relationships. We hope for the best,
Mhm.
but it's also really important to leverage Elle's insights so you can just be sure. Again, trust but verify is key to your long-term success and sanity and
And
avoiding
so
those and avoiding those tough things. Life is too short. You need to make the best of it. So, Elle, I'm so excited we had this conversation, but I would love to hand
thank
the
you.
mic to you one last time. If there's any last points that you want to share with our audience, or how can people best connect with you?
Thank you. Well, again, before you shake hands, it's the ultimate playbook for founders, investors, and partners. And it's really fundamentally all the critical questions that you need to ask before you sign on the dotted line. And I hope it will help some people out there. You can go on to beforeyouShakeHands.com for pre-orders and all the links on where to get the book. And my Instagram, my personal Instagram is the.l.george to find me there and reach out, or I'm available on any sort of format for any questions or advice, limited, but advice in those sort of areas on how I can help. But thank you so much for having me on. It's been great to have the conversation, and I'm
All right.
excited to
Well,
put it out there.
no, and this has been great. So many insights. I really, really value this relationship. I do want to just say thank you so much for dropping in, and I wish you well and much success.
Thank you so much, Deb. Been great chatting.
I'm going to keep the recording going. Liz, I'm going to keep the recording going because when Elle goes off here, I'm just going to record a little bit of an outro. So this was great. Thank you so much. You made my job very easy. Again, I went off some
Thank you.
question
I hope that
prompts
was
here.
okay.
No, it was absolutely wonderful, and I love how you flex with the questions. And you did strike. I always get enriched by the conversations while I put you on a pedestal, shine a light on your gifts so that you can put your thoughts out there, and the listeners will
Hmm.
benefit. But I didn't realize we would might go in a direction about attachment styles,
Yeah.
and you talked about the three. And I was
Hmm.
starting to get a little bit emotional inside because I'm saying, okay, then which one did I come from? And
Yeah.
I was saying to myself, okay, that might explain things. So I fall into the second one, where it's not complete
Hmm.
crisis, but it's very tumultuous. And I could see myself, and again, there are things that my husband has had to undo, but that element of
Hmm.
proving myself was, again, high achiever, trying to excel, get
Yeah.
up there in corporate. Am I doing okay? The self-doubt, even though people will look at me and say, Deb, we can't believe what you did since you left corporate. You got a podcast, you wrote a book, you got a business, you're all over the place. They see all this success, and I keep pushing myself. I got to prove myself. I got to prove myself. When I've had to
Hmm.
kind of retract a little bit and say, Deb, you are amazing. You've got people that love you in your life. You are good enough. You are doing enough. You don't have to keep proving yourself. Whew. So now, you bringing that up, it kind of
Yeah.
makes sense for me. So I appreciate you bringing up that.
And it does. And I was the same as you because I constantly felt like I had imposter syndrome. I constantly felt like everyone's saying, "Oh, you're amazing. You need to do this, everything."
Yeah.
And it's like, thank you, thank you. I just almost didn't feel worthy. I just didn't feel like, like it was enough or like it was,
Yeah. Or
do
have
you
I
know what I
made it
mean?
yet?
And it's
Or have I
still,
made?
yeah, have I made it? Exactly. And so I think when we can really forgive ourselves for that, and if you can go back and do, and if you'd like me to, I can send you some information on it. But it really helped me heal because I was one of nine kids. And as they came along, and sisters, and I was the sort of tomboy. And so as the new one came along, the next one got shunted down the line. And I tried every sport to try and get my dad's attention. I tried every possible thing. And even up until my dad at 89 came to Bali 2 years ago en route to my daughter's wedding in the UK. He came to Bali, and my friend had come down to meet him, and he said, and I took Dad around to my businesses and said, oh, here's this and here's that. My dad didn't say a word. And I'd flown him over business class, and he'd never flown business class in his life. Didn't say a word. I was so excited to show him. And my friend came over and said, oh my God, what do you think about Elle's business and things like this? And he said, oh, yeah, it's okay. And my friend turned around and said, it's okay. And he looked at her, he's quite expressive. He's like, she's built an empire. And my dad said, it's good. And I was like, wow, tough room, and there was that moment where I totally realized that there is nothing that I could say or do in that moment. And I forgave myself for all those years of me trying to prove my worth, and realized I don't need to prove it to anyone but me in that moment. It's not to my husband or my ex-husband. It's not to my kids. It's not anything. I just need to show up as authentically as I can and do the self work. And, then it doesn't matter what people think. And some people, because once the more, as you know, the more successful you get, the more people have got opinions.
Mm. So if I have a few
And it's none
haters,
of
it's
our
okay.
business but you know what? It's none of our business what other people think about us.
Can't control it.
And
Yeah.
I have people tell me sometimes, you're this or you're that. And I said, you know what? Thankfully, I care about a great many things in my life, and what you think of me is not one of them. And I had a man say to me recently, because I'm building a house on a different island, and he said, you know what? He said, an old school, Australian service. You're a bit much. He said, I was thinking about it. He goes, you're just a bit too much. And I said, you know what? That's actually a really interesting point. And I said, did you ever thought to yourself that maybe you're not enough? Now, I would not normally say that to somebody. And I said, you know what? Have a great night. But in that moment, it felt so good, because I thought that person is never going to do the work. They're never going to process. He's some old crusty thing that sits and holds a bar up every day. And do you know what I mean? But at that moment, that felt so good. And I wouldn't be that cutting normally, but I thought, I'm done with people telling me I'm too much. Too much of what? Too much love? Too much showing up in the world? So for you, it's the same. It's none of our business what other people think about us. Just you. You're the only person that
Yeah.
looks in that mirror every day and has the entitlement and the authority to make an opinion on you, is the one looking straight back at you every single day. And do you know what? I've got a very short exercise for you to do, and it will crack you open. When you stand in front of the mirror tonight, when you take your makeup off
Yeah.
and you wash your face, and you're there and you normally just wash, 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 and then you go and do your things, I want you to stay there for a minute, and I want you to connect with your own eyes for 5 minutes. And I want you to look at your eyes, and then I want you to go, oh, you're going to look at the color and those things. And then I want you to go deep and just keep looking at yourself, not staring blankly, but open that soul and see what comes out for yourself. And it will be probably the most incredible emotional experience you've ever done. And
Thank
healing, I
you.
hope.
Thank you. What I'm going to do is save that, not tonight, because I am very tired, but I will tell you
Yeah.
briefly, I have looked at my eyes. The eyes are the mirror to the soul. And
Yep.
I've looked at my eyes and I keep proclaiming to my husband, my eyes are blue. And he's like, oh, Dad, they're hazel. No, they're blue. But they're a nice color. I love my eyes. My eyes, when I'm photographed, I feel is my best feature. And I say, focus on
Hmm.
the eyes. And I'm going to take what you said, because I also know that if I look deep inside, and it'll get me teared up, is this creative that continues to want to create. I am not defined by having been an engineer, a
Hmm.
leader in corporate. It is that creative that just wants to connect with the world. And I think I will probably cry to
You
your
will a lot.
exercise.
You will a lot, because once you go past the color and looking at the little specks and all this and all that, because we look at ourselves and we say, oh, he's wrinkled and
Oh my God, yeah, we're so
all those things.
self-critical.
But when we look in our eyes and we look past that, the
Yeah,
first moment is looking at the actual color and the lines and the things. But when you really look at yourself and just take a moment and just do some nice deep breaths, and you really look at yourself, it's going to open up some stuff for you.
I can't wait to share my
And
experience back with you.
it's a really beautiful process, and I'm so glad that I did. I did it by accident one day, and every now and then I kind of check in with myself and do that, and who am I, and what are you doing, girlfriend? Like, what's going on? What's
Beautiful.
going on for you? How's your heart? All of that. So try that, and I hope it does the same for you that it did for me.
Elle, I want to wish you a very good rest of your day. I'll ask that you sign
Thank
off because I'm
you.
going to do a little more recording here.
100%.
You're
A
wonderful.
hundred
I'll be in
percent.
touch with you. Thank you so much.
Super. Thank
Take
you
care.
so much. Pleasure.
Bye. Okay, Liz, in this episode, thank you for listening to that, a little bit of banter. I wanted to do a little bit of a sales thing at the very end. So I'm wondering if this bit can be inserted. This is something a little bit new. I'm going to be doing it in my solos, but because once a month I am getting a paid sponsorship for somebody to guest on my show, and it's actually pretty lucrative. I've been taking them, but I didn't have an opportunity to do a little bit of a pitch. So perhaps after her last question, I'm thinking, allow me to read these three lines here, and then I will go back and say, Elle, this has been such a great conversation. I'd love to give you the mic one last time. I'm wondering if we can insert this. And if it doesn't make sense, maybe somewhere in the middle. But I'm going to be saying something. If you love this episode, so it kind of assumes you listened to the whole thing. A lot of podcasters will do sales within, and I will do this on the solos. But I'm going to read this now and ask that see if you can insert this just probably just before I bring it to a close. So just before I say, Elle, this has been an amazing conversation, but I'd love to turn the mic back over to you one last time. If you can slip this in, that would be great. So I'm going to try to give this a read now. If you love this episode, please go to my website, dropinceo.com/marketplace to find my audio mini course. It is 3 hours of content, amazing content with a do it yourself guide that helps you to convert the insights that I've been sharing with you into action. It is a true value at $35 as compared to coaching support, which can be 10 times that price. If you want to make an investment in yourself, again, check out my audio mini courses at dropinceo.com/marketplace. And now back to the conversation. Okay, let's give that a try. This is something a little bit different, but it just wasn't appropriate just to drop it in during this guest podcast. It just, I couldn't find the will to fit it in. So thank you so much. Again, she's a paid sponsor, so it goes just a little bit longer. I think we recorded for about 35 to 40 minutes. Want to wish you well, and thanks again, Liz. Bye. If I could just stop the recording here. Bye.